Ask Mike, brought to you by the Stadium Shop on Razorback in Fayetteville.
Happy Monday, everybody. It's time for another edition of Ask Mike. Courtney Mims alongside Mike Irwin here. Mike, you feeling good on this Monday?
Yeah, pretty good.
Good.
Might mess with you a little bit today.
You said you were going to mess with me today. I don't like it, all right? Or we'll see how much you mess with me today. Let's jump right into those questions, shall we? Our first question is from Mousetown, who says, I was starting to think that the basketball team was like the last two struggling in January, but a holy terror come February. Looks like I was wrong. What's different about these guys?
The only thing different right now is they dug themselves a bigger hole than they did a year ago or 2 years ago. Last year, for instance, they were 8-4 at this point. Now they're 6-6. That's a big difference. So they had more to overcome, and I don't think they had a loss like this in February. This was a real setback. So what is the difference? Yeah, I went back and looked, and there's not a big scoring difference. There's not something jumps out at you, different defense or anything like that. I think one of the things is they had 4 players that were generally starting that were in double figures a year ago, and this year there's only 3. And you've got 2 guys that are true freshmen that they're counting heavily on. Nick Smith Jr. hasn't been playing. He obviously came back for this game. But, you know, last year you weren't counting on a guy like Anthony Black to carry you. You weren't counting on Jordan Walsh, a freshman, you know, to kind of play well every game. And so I think that makes a difference. I also think there's a perception thing here that because you had these 3 McDonald's All-Americans at the start of the year coming in, man, you're going to rip everybody apart. Well, we know one of them got injured and missed a bunch of games, like 7 weeks of games. The other one, Walsh, he's a guy that's going to need to play 2 years at least, maybe 3. He's a good player. He's going to be, I think, better next year. And he's okay this year, but he makes mistakes. And we're not going to see the best of Anthony Black. For a freshman, he's been really good and really playing hard. I think he's frustrated right now. But, you know, there's a lot on his shoulders too, and he is a true freshman. And he's being asked to be a point guard. We go back into this whole point guard thing. Is he really a point guard? Well, yes, he's a point guard, but he's a guy that grew a whole lot in a short period of time. And it's harder to be a 6'8" point guard because you have dribbling issues when you dribble into and what we're seeing this year which is a lot of tight zone defenses. So he's turning the ball over some like that. And I also think teams in the middle part of the SEC and even down near the bottom are better able to pull off an upset.
That's what I was going to say.
Than, you know, last year or the year before. So it's not necessarily that teams are better at the top, but they're better at the middle part and down below, and that's why you get a thing like this. The SEC is just getting better and better in basketball. I can remember 5, 6, 7 years ago, it wasn't that good.
Yeah.
And even this year, you're going to have people say, well, they didn't do well in the Big 12 Challenge. But look, everybody's getting new coaches. They're bringing in good coaches. Mississippi State brought in a guy that had won.
Yeah, Chris Jans from New Mexico State.
And now he's starting to make a big difference about halfway through the conference race, a little bit more than halfway through. So it's just more competitive. I wouldn't panic. They've still got a chance, especially what we talked about last week. What kind of an impact does Nick Smith Jr. make? Maybe certainly not in that first game back, but how long does it take him to get back? And if it's 2 games or whatever, he's still got a chance to make an impact, but it also could be too late. I still think they probably get in. Here's the issue. They got to move back past a bunch of other people. They could have been tied for 4th. Now they're tied for 7th. So you got to figure out a way to, I think 5 teams get in from the SEC. So how do you become one of the top 5? Well, you're going to have to move past some people. It's not necessarily just a matter of where they stand right now, because Arkansas's net ranking or whatever is higher than some teams that are above them. So I don't think they're in bad shape. The problem is who they've got left. You got 6 games left, 3 road games. All 3 of those road games are against the top 3 teams in the SEC in the standings right now. So it's going to be hard to win any of those games. And then you've got that Kentucky game at home. The perception is Kentucky is going to be looking for revenge. That's going to be a game which might decide whether they get into the NCAA tournament or not. so it's going to be a big deal to them. And so you lose that game, and then there's a danger that you don't go.
Yeah.
So that's where we're at right now.
I think the SEC is just tough in general because you mentioned all those road games, but they even host Florida at home and Georgia at home. And Georgia, it's a Mike White coach team that's can be on or off one night. I mean, you can face an upset to that team as well. So they need to be on it for the rest of the season, Mike.
And
they
again,
really
Nick
can.
Smith Jr. has to very quickly figure out a way to contribute.
Very quickly. Hopefully it doesn't take him longer than 2 games, right, Mike? So as Giles says, I keep reading that Nick Smith Jr. messed up the team chemistry, that he played too much and it caused Devo and Council to go backwards. What do you think, Mike?
Yeah, that's a common theory. You see it all over the place. It was debated even among people on my Twitter site. I put it out there, and then probably more than not said he did. I don't tend to believe that. If he messed up the chemistry, how do you explain Anthony Black? Because he had a terrific game, 23 points, 5 rebounds, 5 assists, I think 3 or 4 steals.
Yeah.
He played a great game. It didn't mess his chemistry up. The 2 players that didn't play well were Devo and Ricky Council IV, and it looked like to me they just weren't hitting their shots. Some of it was the better defense they were going up against, and some of it was just missing some shots, especially Devo that he's been hitting. I just think it was an inconsistency on their part. But the other thing is, lack of offense is not what got them beat. What got them beat was they gave up too many points to a team that scored a season high in that game. And I don't think you can blame that defense on Nick Smith Jr. coming back. I don't think he played terrific defense, but there were plenty of other guys that had bigger issues than he did. So I don't think that was it. I just think, looking back, you had a team that was a lot better than people realized, that was getting better.
A lot better.
And you're coming off a big emotional win where you're thinking, whew, we got over that hill. We went to Lexington and won, and maybe the team you beat wasn't as good as you thought they were, and maybe you're not as good as you think you are, and all of a sudden you're playing a team that's a lot better than you think they are. I think it was a lot of that.
I was saying it, I think on this show 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, this is the definition of a trap game. Coming out of Kentucky, if you come off beating Kentucky, you're feeling good, you're feeling great. A Mississippi State team that was at the bottom of the league, getting hot, feeling good about them, themselves. It's the definition of a trap game.
Yeah,
it really was.
And it was.
It really was. Pig's Feet wants to know more about Nick Smith Jr. Why are there so many, I don't want to call them haters, people down on Nick Smith Jr.? He didn't choose to be injured. He did choose the Hogs. And I'm happy he is a Hog. That's a nice way to think about it.
Yeah, it is. But when you look at the people that were down on him and are still down on him, because there's some of them still mad at him, a lot of it has to do with all these rumors about what was going on. Rumors that he really wasn't injured, rumors that it was his agent doing this. Why does he have an agent? The guy's an NIL agent, but he's clearly really a pro sports agent. And why do you have that? And I think some of it is that he is the first absolute one and done. When you recruited him and brought him in, the minute he got on campus, you knew he was a one and done. Arkansas's had another one and done, but not a guy that you knew absolutely. And I think this is new territory for Arkansas fans. It's like, well, what's the deal with this guy? If he's a one and done, why is he playing, So in my experience with fans, when they don't know for sure what's going on, they will buy into rumors. And so I think a lot of them bought into this rumor that he wasn't really hurt, didn't really have a problem. It was just him sitting out, didn't think he was going to come back. Okay, they were proven wrong. He did come back. But, gee, he didn't play all that well, and so it messed up the chemistry, and we're just mad at him. The only way that turns around is if he starts contributing and helps them win games, which I think he will do. Again, we don't know how quickly, but once he starts helping them win games and they realize he's a net plus, then all that will go away.
Yeah. It's also hard when you've taken that long of a time off to jump in and immediately be expected to be the savior of a team.
Yeah.
You know, it's just, I mean, I kind of agree with some of the fans there that not that it messed up the team chemistry, but there is some figuring out how to fit him into that rotation and how to work with a new player on the court. And I'm going to call him a new player because he hasn't played since December.
Sure.
So,
I was on the radio with Matt Jones, the former Razorback, and he does a lot of hunting with dogs, and he likes to go out all day long, and so he'll trade out dogs because they get real tired.
Yeah.
So he'll go out before lunch with 2 dogs, then he'll come back and get 2 more. And he said, when you take the other dog out, they're so anxious that they're running around going crazy at first and making mistakes and not doing what they're supposed to do because they're over anxious. He felt like that's what Nick Smith Jr. was doing, especially early on. He was trying so hard. He wanted to he was excited. If you're down on this kid and you're saying he didn't want to play, you weren't paying attention to when he came in the game.
Yeah.
He couldn't wait to get into the game.
He was like jumping. He was like super excited.
Yeah. So I think that some of that was just he was too hyped, and you can't be off for 7 weeks. All these other guys have been doing things in these 7 weeks. They've been getting better. He's got to catch up to that. That's a tough order.
Yeah, it really is. I agree with you there, Mike. Hot Dogger asks, it looked like there was a little dust-up between Anthony Black and Jordan Walsh on the floor at the Mississippi State game. Hope it's not a symptom of what might be hurting the Hogs.
Yeah, you noticed that because you were in the stands as a fan, and you weren't at it at the right angle, and you thought he was trying to hit him.
I did, yeah.
When you go look at the correct angle, here's what happened. Anthony Walsh was doing an inbound.
Anthony Black?
No, it was Walsh.
Yeah, Anthony Black and Jordan Walsh.
Yeah, it was Black. It was Walsh doing the inbounds pass.
Gotcha.
And Black was receiving the pass. Okay, they were on the Mississippi State baseline. So and the problem is on TV, you were there. I don't think you noticed it either. And our Will was doing something else, shooting. No, he wasn't there.
He wasn't there yet. You were still doing the show.
We were having to come back from here because we had to do the 6 o'clock sports. But it cuts away on TV and you can't see, but there's a turnover. Walsh clearly threw the pass wrong, goes out of bounds, and Black is mad, and he walks up to him and he's pointing and it was supposed to be here and you did that. That's all that was. It was frustration because these other guys they're playing great basketball and we keep screwing up. And so I'm frustrated because I'm not screwing up. I'm playing my tail off.
Great.
And the rest of you guys aren't, and you're making mistakes. So I'm going to get frustrated and tell you what you did wrong.
Yeah.
There was another incident like that earlier in the game where Ricky Council IV, and I don't remember which of the 2 Mitchell brothers it was, but he got all over him about a foul.
Yes, I remember
that was committed,
that.
or maybe his reaction after a foul. And he was like, yeah. This is just stuff that happens in a game when you're getting beat and you're trying to get everybody focused. So no, it's not a sign of players mad at each other or bad chemistry suddenly because you got Nick Smith Jr. out there. Everybody wants to believe somehow the chemistry got all messed up because they were playing so well and then they aren't. And I just think it was what we talked about earlier.
Yeah.
That was a trap game.
Yeah, it definitely was. This one's an interesting question. PTN #1 fan says, all this rain and snow really can damper a person's day and influence their attitude. Do you think Musselman corresponds to the weather as well?
See, I don't know anything about him in weather other than he loves to go to San Diego when he has time off.
So he loves the sunshine.
He loves the beach and the sunshine, and he loves being out there. So I assume he likes warm weather and all that stuff. But he's also a coach in a cold weather. He grew up in a cold weather climate, or he's certainly been in that before when he's coached in cold weather. So I don't know how much it affects him. Here's what I would say. That he's talking about. You're talking about me, because I'm the one that is affected by that. I'm not easy to be around this time of year.
You are affected by weather.
Absolutely. I tend to hibernate in the winter when I'm either at work in this studio.
Yes.
I go straight home and I stay in my house. I don't go outside unless I have to, because I do not like cold weather. Also don't like to be out in the rain or the wind or anything else that's goofy. If the weather's good and the sun is out, I love to be outside. I don't like, so that's me. I don't think it's Musselman. However, Musselman is a very moody guy. If you don't know that, it's probably been because you've been looking at social media where he's always happy and running around and smiling, and you see him after games with with the fans, and he's always in a big group picture, and he's always real happy. When they lose, he's not happy at all. His wife has talked about how they have a bedroom set up out in the pool house, and when they lose, she makes him go out there because she does not want to be around him because he turns into a really angry person.
Yeah, we see that in the press conferences sometimes.
Sometimes we see it in the presser. Sometimes we see it, you know, in just the way others see it in practice because he's very intense. He's very hard on his coaches, difficult to be around for the players and all that. All that's just the intensity that it takes for you to win ball games. The thing I like about this guy, above everything else, other than just he's a winner, and everybody loves the fact that he's put this basketball program back up on the map where he'd kind of fallen down. The thing I like about him is he's one of the few coaches that get a basic concept that I definitely believe in, and that is, first and foremost, the rock base of your fan base is your students on campus. Keep in mind, this is a college team, and it's for college students. If you go back to the beginning of college football, college basketball, the original fans were students. They were on campus. They went to the gym, which was right there on campus, and they were the people that were there. It's like when you were in high school. High school students go to high school games.
Yeah.
So somewhere along the way, with all the money that's involved and all the booster money you need, the students kind of get pushed over in the corner, or they're over here, they're over there. Muss has said from day one, I want these people welcome. He goes and does the pizza thing with them. He hangs out with them. He walks around on campus. He walks into fraternity houses where they're playing basketball in the back behind the house and plays basketball with them. He does all this stuff because he understands you need the students on your side. There's been a lot of complaints by some fans that I've seen on social media. They're saying we need more student seating at Bud Walton.
I agree.
They need to, because they've seen what happens at other schools. Well, here's the issue with that. Other schools don't draw the crowds that Arkansas does. At some schools like Auburn, you need those students to fill up the seats, because if you didn't have them there, some of those seats would be empty.
Yeah.
So it's a lot easier to have more students when you're not selling all your seats. Arkansas sells all of its seats, and you got to run an athletic department on money, and so that's why they have a limited number of students there. But I like Musselman because he gets it that students should come first, and I believe that too.
Yeah, I love that he has that mentality, because he, you know, you saw what happened when there were the snow games, you know, the ice games.
Exactly.
When they came out in full force, I mean, they were the sixth man,
Which
really.
is another reason to not ever have the arena off campus.
Another reason. There you go,
Gotta
Mike.
have it
We'll
there
keep bringing
for
that
those
up in
type
this show,
games.
okay, guys? Lady Back Fan 274 wants to know, and this question cracked me up, Mike, when I first read it. Would you be interested in buying Coach Neighbors' house? After tonight, it might be up for sale.
Okay, that was clearly posted after that Thursday loss at Vanderbilt, which was a pitiful game, but maybe the worst of the year
bad.
in terms of just lack of energy, lack of rebounding, lack of defense. It just looked like they were out there sleepwalking. Now, as far as buying his house, I don't know where he lives, but I promise you I could not afford his house.
I was about to say, Mike, can
I
we
don't make
afford
what
that?
he makes. I could not buy his house. So if they put it up for sale, it won't be me buying it. I won't even be in that neighborhood. Look, they bounced back Sunday with maybe their most impressive conference game of the year, because I'm not saying Missouri's a great team, but they're better than Vanderbilt, and they just dominated them. And they did all the things that they haven't been doing in some of those other losses, like to Ole Miss, like to Auburn, like to Vanderbilt. They played really good defense.
They did. Limiting them to 33 points.
He got to them somehow. Remember, after the Vanderbilt game, Neighbors, I'm thinking, well, you better watch what you're saying. He went to his press conference. He said, all the things that I traditionally have used as motivation in situations like are not working. It's like, I can't figure this team out. And I'm going, that doesn't sound good. But he must have figured something out, because they finally bounced back. Now, the issue is, do they keep it up? I don't know. If they play like this from here on out, there's no problem. Do I think he's going to get fired? No, I don't, because he's got too good of a recruiting class coming in next year. And this team is a young team. So they're probably going to be better next year. It looks like he's got the makings of improving this program and getting it where it needs to be. It's just taking longer than I think some people wanted. But unless they collapse again, I don't see that there's any reason to talk about he's not going to be here.
Did you see what Chrissy Carr tweeted this morning?
No.
She said, good morning to everyone. Happy Monday, except to the people that says Coach Neighbors should be fired.
Yeah, well, they're defending their coach.
They are.
Now, one thing, see,
did make me laugh.
This shows the old fogey in me, because I'm 74 years old. I'm a boomer.
Mike,
I'm a
74.
boomer.
You're young.
I'm a boomer. Boomers look at things differently. What bothered me a little bit was when they won that game, what were they doing? What have you seen on social media? They're out there dancing.
Yeah.
Ha, we're back, we're this, we're that. You won a game. Don't get ahead of yourself. You know, okay, you made up a little bit for what you were doing the previous 2 or 3 games. But you start acting like that, and then what happens the next time when you lose again? So why were you not performing in those other games? Most people are going to say, shut up, Irwin. They won. They have a right to celebrate. And I'm not saying they don't. It's just that I don't react well to stuff like that.
Yeah.
I've talked before about how I went through 4.5 years of college. It took me 4.5 years to graduate because I was working my way through and couldn't take always the number of hours I needed. I was going to be a high school football coach, and I roomed with 3 other guys that actually did that. One of the reasons I decided not to do it was that very reason. That would have been too crazy intense. I didn't believe from the start of practice to the last practice, I believed you had to be all in, 100% committed, don't celebrate. You win a game, yes, we were supposed to win, now let's get it ready for the next one, let's get ready for the next one. It would have been 100% crazy intensity, not letting up on the, don't react this way, don't act like, you score a touchdown, act like you've been there before. Don't over-celebrate. Just do your job. And that wouldn't fly. And definitely today, it would be a disaster if you tried to coach that way.
Yeah, for sure, especially with the celebration.
Your dad's a coach. You got to allow him to have fun.
Yeah, and that's the thing. You got to allow them to have fun, but at
I
the
wouldn't.
same
They wouldn't have
time,
fun.
yeah, my dad agrees with your philosophy. He always tells his players, you know, don't do a lot of trash talk. You know, try and show that you are good through your wins and
Right.
the way you perform. That's how my dad has always thought about it. So
Again, that's the only thing. I thought they celebrated a little too much
Yeah.
after that win. Do that after you've won 3 or 4 in a row, and I'll be more accepting.
you'll be more
of it.
accepting of it. Patty Herman says the women's softball team off to a great start, but it was annoying having to watch the games with no sound and a bad camera work. Boo on ESPN.
Yeah, it wasn't ESPN.
No.
I blame ESPN for a lot of stuff because I don't like them, but you can't blame them for this because this was on YouTube.
Yeah.
And it was strictly a streaming thing off of YouTube, and you either accepted that or you didn't
Yeah,
because there was no other option.
I think the school was streaming it. I think it was like their school feed, right?
I don't know who did it, but you either watched that or you got nothing.
Yeah.
Now, let me just say, I loved it. I absolutely loved it. Why? Because I turn the sound down anyway when they're announcers. I don't like announcers. They annoy me. I like to watch a game on television like you were actually at the game. And the fact that they had a stationary camera it was like you were sitting up in the stands. And I
Yeah.
could tell what was going on.
I know
could
you
watch
love
the.
that.
And the guy said, "Well, there's no graphics, on the pitch count and all that." I could tell what the umpire was doing by his hand motions. He'd do a 3 and 2 and all that. So it's like you're sitting there watching it, and I enjoyed it. I absolutely loved it because it was like being there. So I just felt like I got to go out to Vegas and sit out there and watch some games.
With the palm trees in the
yeah,
background.
the palm trees in the background, and they played well, and there were lots of home runs and good pitching. So,
Yeah, I kind of agree
so
with you there.
I'm not the right person to ask about the fact
Yeah,
that there was just
you
one
like-
camera and it didn't move, and you couldn't see if it went to the corners. You couldn't tell if it was a home run or a foul ball. A little bit on the corners, but I thought it was good. I
Yeah,
liked
you
it.
mute the announcers sometimes when
I
we're
do
in
that.
here. You just like to get the feel of the game
I just don't
and the
want to listen to all the
atmosphere.
chatter. I
Yeah.
mean, look, here's the problem with ESPN especially, but all networks do this. They overproduce. They throw graphics at you left and right. They do replays too long. You want to see, I don't mind a replay, but get that replay out of the way before the next thing happens because I don't want to miss
Oh
something
yeah,
while
the
you're showing a
graphics that
stupid
go up when
replay.
you miss things.
And then I hate all this graphic stuff. Here's this half screen of what this guy's done in the last 6 games. And then they have an interview with somebody, or they have somebody talking about something on the sidelines, or the two guys in the booth are yakking about some thing that one guy did. Is, I went there last week to this bar and I ran into this guy. And I'm just going, shut up. I'm watching this game. I don't care what you did. I don't want to see all these graphics. I don't care what this guy did last week. I'm watching him now, not last week. So they overproduce all this stuff. I would be perfectly happy if games just had cameras and no announcers, and maybe just put up score of the game and show the clock time and all that. And other than that, no graphics.
There you go. That's how Mike Irwin watches his games here. Blake Taylor, 11-12, asks, after the first weekend of Razorback softball, how do you feel about the team this year? I came in fully expecting less power, but we ended with 10 home runs in 5 games. Outscored our opponents 51-9. The freshmen look good, and it looks like they're living up to their hype.
Yeah, I like the home runs part, but I really like the pitching, because that's what I wasn't sure about. Not just the pitching, but how much pitching depth do you have? Courtney Deifel had talked about all the young pitchers and the depth they're going to have. They allowed 2 runs in the first 3 games. Was it 4 games?
No, first four games, because they
games.
shut out their first 3 games.
And then, so it was 4 runs in the first 4 games, 2 runs in the first 4 games. Then they gave up a 5-run inning, was it?
Yeah, because it was the grand slam.
They were up 8-2, and they gave up 5 runs. They gave up 4 of them on a grand slam.
And 2 more in that inning too, I think.
Well, 2 or 1. I can't remember.
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember. But
here's
the point. And they chased Shanice Dells. They chased her, and another pitcher. But then to show you the depth they've got, they brought in a third pitcher, and she shut them down. Now here's what I like, because I've told you before, I like watching games and I get real competitive.
Oh, you do.
For a media person, I shouldn't do that. I'm supposed to be objective. But here's what I noticed. Baylor started thinking the best way to beat a team when they start thinking they're going to win is to let them think they're going to win and then shut the door in their face. So here they have this big inning, and they're back within a run, and they're, Arkansas's undefeated, we're undefeated, we're going to beat the. And then what they did was that after Arkansas's at bat in the next inning, which I think was the 5th.
It was.
When Arkansas didn't score and went back out and was warming up between innings, they're out there hogging up a third of the infield while Arkansas is trying to do their infield, and just out there in the way in a meeting. And I felt like, what are you doing out there? Get out of the way. If you want to have your little huddle, go over toward the dugout.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking, okay, you've made me mad now. You got to punish them. And they came out and hit 2 home runs, one of them a 2-run homer, and now they're up 11-7. And they beat them 11-7 because the third pitcher that came in just shut them down.
Oh, yeah.
Just
no hope there.
They did nothing after that. So it was just fun watching it. Now, if you had asked me a few years ago, they get this into women's softball, people that know me would have laughed. Not that I have anything against women's sports from the standpoint of the athletes, but what I've always had a problem all throughout my career is fans don't go to these things.
Yeah.
And if you're I don't care if you're at a basketball game, a softball game, whatever it is, soccer, if you don't have fans, it just seems kind of ugh.
Yeah.
Now what we're seeing at Arkansas, we're starting to see people go to these games, and they're getting into it more.
A
lot of people at gymnastics, these record crowds. We're seeing people show up for soccer. We're seeing people show up for softball. I like all this stuff. And so now you start getting into this a little more, and it's fun. I think it's going to be a fun spring. I really do. I think we're going to enjoy watching baseball and softball.
Oh, I think we are too.
And hopefully women's basketball and men's basketball too.
Yeah, hopefully we have a really good March coming up, right? Hopefully a really good March. Let's hope for that. Marty Bird's Proxy asks, with the confirmation that OU and Texas are coming in the conference sooner than originally scheduled, what is your best guess on football scheduling? Any idea how basketball might work?
Okay, it's been funny that, first we had, okay, we're going to do it in 2024. Then came the word, nope, we can't do it, it's 2025. And then all of a sudden we learned last week, whoops, 2024 is on again.
Yep.
So what started happening, I noticed on Twitter, you got all these fans and they're taking the SEC map with their little graphics.
They're drawing.
And they're drawing into divisions. This is really the East, this is the West, and having fun. Well, the problem is it's pretty much already, I don't know if they've made an official statement on this, but it has been sort of out there for well over a year that in this new 16-team conference, they are not going to have divisions, the East and the West. And what we've been hearing for a while is a pod system, and the pod system would be 4 4-team pods. So you play the other 3 teams in your pod every year,
and then you
would rotate the other 5, except now we're hearing for a while now that it's going to be 9 conference games instead of 8. Why 9? I think it's because of TV. More and more, everything is built around getting more money from television revenue. Well, the TV people aren't stupid. They're not going to pay you more money if they don't get something in return. They want to eliminate these rent-a-win games. So if you can eliminate a mid-major conference, a Power 5 team playing a mid-major and replace it with another conference game, they'll do it, you know, because that's a bigger draw. And I've said before, I think eventually you're going to see a new division in men's football, or football, not just, there is no women's football. A new division in football, a new top division, maybe have 96 teams, and it's going to be I think the Power 5 will become the Power 4, and then they'll add some teams in there, and they will all play each other, and you will see an elimination of teams like Alabama wouldn't play a Middle Tennessee State anymore. Arkansas wouldn't play a Missouri State. You would just play a team from another conference, all because of television. So I think this is where we're headed with the schedule. Now, the one thing is, I'm thinking, you know, if you know what they did with basketball when they eliminated the divisions, it's just a rotating schedule. There's no pods there or anything. It's a rotating schedule. Well, what if they did that with football? So
I actually read that somewhere.
Well, Greg Sankey had said that his goal, he does not like it. The SEC commissioner does not like it that sometimes teams go 3 or 4 years without playing each other.
Yeah.
He thinks they ought to play each other at least every other year. You ought to have played at least every other team in the SEC. Well, the way to do that is just to have a rotating schedule without permanent opponents. That's how you can make that happen. But here's the problem with that. If you do that, you eliminate annual rivalry games. Every other year, you might not have Ole Miss and Mississippi State. You might not have Auburn and Alabama. So what do you do then? Well, what if you had a one-pod system? In other words,
or just play the rivalry game.
That's
right?
what I'm saying.
Yeah.
You got one permanent opponent.
Yeah.
And that would be your rival that you play in rivalry week, and every other team on your schedule just rotates. The problem with that is it creates some weird situations. For instance, let's say that Texas comes in, well, they're coming in, and it's determined, okay, Texas is going to be a rivalry with A&M. So that eliminates the LSU rivalry with A&M right now, and that would bring LSU back into play for Arkansas. We could tell Missouri to take a hike, and they can go be rivals with Vanderbilt or Oklahoma or somebody else. That would be good.
Vanderbilt.
But you've still got Texas OU. What do you do about that? If you made Texas and A&M permanent rivals with each other, then you eliminate you would make that Texas OU game every other year, and maybe they don't want to do that. Especially they wouldn't like it in Dallas because that's about the only thing that keeps that Cotton Bowl stadium going. And no one's asked this question, but what happens to that game? When Oklahoma and Texas are now in the same conference, do they play a home and home? Because the neutral site game between Arkansas and A&M is going away. Well, would it go away with the Texas OU game too? Eliminate that playing at the fairgrounds in the Cotton Bowl? Maybe. So there are just all kinds of things we don't know about right now. And it's going to be interesting when this first schedule comes out. It won't be too long, I think, and then we'll all get excited and see how this works.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because I think that with the time changes, you know, with it being 2025, 2024, I heard on ESPN radio that for the first year, they may not even restructure. They may do it as a just free-for-all kind of thing while they're still figuring out that pod system.
It's just going to be really interesting to see this first schedule.
I think it's going to be pretty wild, Mike, so we'll have to wait until that comes out. We can react to it when it does. Okinawa Hog says, I hope people don't panic regarding the in-state QB committing to Auburn. Plenty of time for Coach Sam Pittman and the new OC to show him what the new offensive scheme will be this year. What do you think, Mike?
Look, Walker White's going to do what he wants to do. He's got family. He's got Razorback ties in his family. This is not a kid that decided to go to Auburn because he's mad at somebody.
No.
There are kids that just say, I'm going out of state. And if that weren't true, half of Arkansas's roster they wouldn't have these guys. It would be all in-state guys. It's amazing to me that Arkansas fans don't get mad when they steal teams out of Texas, out of Florida, out of Georgia, and all these places, but they don't want an Arkansas kid to go anywhere else. And it's especially bad if he's a quarterback and a top-rated recruit. I'm just saying, if that's where he wants to go, let him go. Why would you worry about that? It could even be cool. If you want to be mad at him, wait till, if he's ever a starter at Auburn, wait till he comes back here and plays, and then you can be up in the stand, you can be mad at him if that's what motivates you. As far as Dan Enos being able to flip him, I guess that might happen, but just based on what I've read, I don't think it's going to happen.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to happen either, but hey, I just feel like you said, you can be mad at him when he comes and plays Arkansas, but he's going to make the decision.
If that's what floats your boat. The way I look at it is, well, how would you like it if that sort of trend was applied to Arkansas, where you could only have, you couldn't take any players from out of state.
Yeah,
all the players in Texas stayed in Texas. All the players in Florida stayed in all Georgia. Think of all these guys you wouldn't have.
Yeah, you think Florida or UCF is mad about Rocket Sanders coming to Arkansas? Nah, they were like, oh,
okay, we got this guy.
Exactly. So I agree with you there, Mike. Whippersnapper wants to know who is in your top 3 favorite offensive and defensive players for Football Hogs of all time. Ooh, this is a good one.
Okay, I think I got to go with the question, which is favorite as opposed to absolute top players of all time.
Okay.
Because there's a difference.
Okay.
If you tried to determine the top players and you only had 3 on each side of the ball, I don't know that I could do that. It'd be a million. We'd debate forever. So I'm going to give you just my favorites, okay?
Oh, I know.
So let's start on offense, and I'm going to go with Matt Jones because I love the way you just couldn't beat him in an overtime game. I like to watch that long stride that he had. I've never seen a kid that tall, that fast. It was fun to watch him just run by people. And then they always said he couldn't pass, and he really could, and I always enjoyed watching him beat people and proving them wrong. So he was one of my favorites. And then D-Mac, I mean, come on. I don't think Arkansas has ever had a running back that physical who was that fast.
Yeah.
He could just run over you and knock you into the next county, or he could just blow by you so fast you never even saw him.
Knock you into the next county. I
love that. He was just that guy he was intense. He was a Razorback. He's still a Razorback. How could you not like D-Mac?
Yeah.
And then I had to have a tie with the wide receivers because I like Traylon Burks. I mean, we all know what he was.
We love Traylon Burks.
He was a guy that went up for if the ball was up in the air, he's going to come down with it, right? Mm-hmm. He could jump. He was physical. He had great hands. He was faster than he looked. He's one of these guys that was so big you thought he wasn't fast, and he was really fast. Then Anthony Lucas wasn't fast at all, but he could really jump. And he had an ability to zero in on the ball, and you could see 4 guys. He could be surrounded by 3 or 4 defensive backs and just bring it down.
Yeah.
He was amazing, and he made that winning touchdown catch against Tennessee in '99, and
that was awesome.
People will remember that forever. The whole field was just full of people, and they tore the goalpost down, and they carried it down to Dixon Street and duct taped it to a building down there. It was great.
Yeah, I was watching
those are my offensive players.
I was watching some of Anthony Lucas's highlights because we were pulling video of him for one of our face-offs this year, and it was cool to see him. Because I hadn't really watched a lot of obviously Hog games in the '90s, but I was like, wow.
He was always so polite.
So athletic. I mean,
he would always call me Mr. Irwin, and I told him one day, stop calling me Mr. Irwin. Just call me Mike. And he said, look, my mom won't let me do that. Anybody I always have to say Mr. to my elders, and I said, your mom's not here. She's like 300 miles away or whatever. And he goes, my mom is always with me.
Aww,
so he's a
awesome.
really cool guy.
All right, who's your defensive? Let's see.
All right, let's take a look at these guys. Billy Ray Smith, he's on the 79 team. He was a freshman. That was the 3rd or 4th team I covered here. The thing I liked about Billy Ray was that he was just a great pass rusher and just a guy that was tough and physical, but he was so funny in locker rooms. Those were in the days where you could take your camera in a locker room, and I still remember one day after a Baylor game, he's standing there, he's got his football pants on, but there's no shirt on, and you can see these weird bite marks all over his abdomen.
What?
And somebody goes, what is that? And he goes, what do you think it is? And he goes, well, I don't know. It looks like bite marks. He said, I think that's a good guess. And they're going, why do you have bite marks? And he said, because when you're down on the ground, they bite you.
That's great.
And
That
then
is
there was
great.
one sports writer that was wearing a rather strange tie. The guy always wore a tie to games, and it was a very weird-looking tie. He asked Billy Racy, he said, because it was a tie game, whatever game they were talking about, he said, "Is this the most frustrating tie you've ever been a part of?" And he said, "No, that's the most frustrating tie." Because the guy did have a rather weird tie. So Billy Ray was really funny. Okay, who else here? Okay, Bumper Pool. Thing I like about Bumper Pool is not only is his longevity. He played forever, right?
Loved it.
Played his COVID year. He would have kept playing, but he got hurt, and he was just his hip. And I don't think people understood what he was doing out there. He was playing on a bad hip, and when he was not in the game and you'd watch him walking, there was always this horrible limp. But then when he got out on the field, you didn't see it. And I've been told he was playing in pain for most of last season.
Wow.
You know, so you got to love a guy like that that's that dedicated. And then a guy from Bua's hometown. I think they were both from the same place in Texas, outside the Dallas area. Tony Bua was probably the most all-in, I'm not going to do anything but tackle you. He had like a radar. And he was going after the ball. So he was either going to sack the quarterback or intercept a pass or tackle you with the ball. Wherever the ball was, it was like he had a radar. And he was just zeroed in, focused. And another guy that was just, if you asked me to put up a picture of the definition of a Razorback, I'd have his photo up there because he loved being a Razorback.
Oh.
So those are my guys.
I love that. Let us know if you agree with Mike's picks in the comments, and let us know your 3 top offensive and defensive players as well. Revolution says, and this is our final question of the day, I enjoyed last week's insight into Coach Anderson. Do you have any interesting stories about the folks who previously covered the Hogs or served as broadcasters over the years?
Yeah, I'm going to go with a guy named Mike Olmstead. He was actually the sports director in the early 2000s, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 in there, right here at this television station when I was the sports director at the CBS station, but we did a radio show together called Press Row. Okay, this was at a time when there was a chancellor at this school, an academic chancellor, who decided to involve himself in athletics. And he didn't know what he was doing, and he caused a lot of problems. The whole Mitch Mustang, Houston Nutt, Gus Malzahn thing basically was a result of some of the stuff this guy had been doing. Gary Blair, the greatest basketball coach in the history of the school, he essentially fired him by telling him he wasn't going to renew his contract, and then Blair goes on and win a national championship at A&M. The guy was a goofball, and he was really frustrating all of us. So I'm doing this show with Olmstead, and Olmstead's there one day, and he's mad, and he said, I don't know if I can do anything about this guy, but I'm going to dog him. I'm going to dog him on the radio every day until he gets out of athletics, because he needs to keep his nose out of it. So that's what he would do. Every time he heard a story about John I shouldn't mention the guy's name. I was trying to. But this chancellor, every time he does this, every time he does that, I'm going to mention it. And he starts doing it, but one day he starts calling him Oz. Oz did this, Oz did that, Oz, and I'm like, wait a minute, where'd you come up with Oz? He said, well, who was Oz? I said, I don't know. He was the guy behind the curtain pulling all the levers. He said, that's what he is. He said, you got all the smoke, and you got the big giant head, and the smoke, and the noise, and all the fire, all the chaos, but it's actually a little guy behind the curtain doing all this. That's Oz, and then everybody loved it.
Oh, okay.
So this becomes a thing. People would call in. I saw Oz today at the grocery store. Or I saw Oz over here, and it's just Oz. So one day, the producer of the show comes out of the control room and tells me during the break, hey, a guy wants to talk to you on the phone off the air. So I go in there, and he goes, hey, I didn't want to say this on the air, but he said, I'm over at the university, and I have some business in the administration building, and I pulled into the parking lot, and I'm listening to your show. I have the windows down in my car because it's summertime, I think, and he said, a guy pulls up next to me, and he's got his window down, and we're both listening to Press Row, and he said, I look over there, and it's Oz, and he's listening, and Olmstead is going, Oz, and he said, you could just see the steam coming out of his ears, and he said, he finally rolled up his windows, got out of the car, and slammed the door and walked off going, what is this Oz stuff? Oz, what is this? And so I went back and told Olmstead this whole story, and this had been his goal all along. And he sits there and he does this Paul Eels impersonation. Touchdown, Arkansas! He had succeeded in doing what he wanted to do. So
Wow.
he was a funny guy to work with.
I love that story. Oz the Great and Powerful, but not
Oz
so
the Great
and
well,
powerful.
he was powerful in messing up U of A athletics, that's for
Well,
sure.
there you go. That's going to do it for this week's Ask Mike. We'll see you next Monday to answer more of your questions.